Hi, everybody. Welcome to Both Sides of the Story. I'm your host, Alan Janae from CBS 4. Thanks for joining us. Our special high school debate fall tournament continues. Welcome to the semifinal rounds. On tonight's show, students from George Washington High School and Mountain Vista High School square off for a spot in this season's championship. Both of the students tonight have prepared a pro and a con case for tonight's debate topic. They won't know which side they're on until we have a coin flip right here in our studio. So let's meet our semifinalists. Up first, Nick Gerrans. Nick is from George Washington High School. He's a senior who has debated ever since he was a ninth grader. He has done both Lincoln Douglas and public forum debate, and he also plays lacrosse. He wants to go to college on one of the coasts, and he wants to study political science. Next is Avi Bandari. Avi is a senior at Mountain Vista High School. When not doing debate, Avi runs cross country and track and volunteers weekly at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. Also joining us is our special panel of experts who will offer their analysis of our debate. They are Dominic Dezzutti, host of Colorado Decides, the election debate series produced in conjunction with CBS 4. And next to him is Eric Sonderman, political analyst, seen right here on Colorado Inside Out on Friday nights. All right, let's set some ground rules right now. Each side will present their case, ask each other questions, and have a chance to offer rebuttals. When it is finished, we'll go to our illustrious panel for their questions, and we'll find out who they felt offered the best argument. So let's get started tonight. The issue up for debate is this: should Colorado offer tax incentives or subsidies to corporations that consider moving to Colorado? So let's have our coin flip right now and get underway. And Avi, I'm going to have you call this one.
Heads.
And we have heads. What would you like?
I'll take the affirmative side.
You'll take the affirmative, which means you go first, and Nick, you'll be going second. So affirmative right now. The floor is yours, Avi, for 3 minutes to make your case. Go ahead.
I affirm today's resolution. Colorado should offer tax incentives or subsidies to corporations who consider moving to Colorado. My first argument is that subsidies will provide Colorado with an economic boom. Investopedia finds that government subsidies help an industry by paying for part of the cost of production of a good or service by offering tax credits or reimbursements, or by paying for part of the cost that a consumer would pay to purchase a good or service. These in turn allow businesses to expand. In fact, what the World Trade Organization finds is that in a study of subsidies and their effects on businesses, it was found that a year after a business was given a grant, a small business's average growth was accelerated by 50%. It is clear to see that in order to allow for small businesses expansion in Colorado, subsidies are critical. Small business expansion is important as The Economist finds that small businesses present new employment opportunities and serve as the building blocks for local communities. In fact, since 1995, small businesses have generated 64% of all new jobs and paid for 44% of the total United States private payroll. Clearly, expanding small businesses is critical to boost Colorado's economy, and affirming the resolution and having Colorado offer subsidies is the best way to achieve our economic goals. My second argument is that tax incentives will provide Colorado's future in renewable energy. The Balance explains how tax incentives usually provide the tipping point on whether businesses decide to relocate to a particular location. This is because while all cities in a region generally have the same levels of wage and transportation costs, a difference in the level of taxes may galvanize a company to move to a location. Renewable energy companies, like those producing energy through wind, solar, geothermal, and hydroelectric energy, are especially incentivized to relocate through tax incentives, as Reuters finds that due to price volatility in the industry, companies in the renewable energy industry seek to absolutely minimize the costs of their business. This often means that incentive programs like the Renewable Energy Grant tend to have a massive effect on persuading companies to move. By letting Colorado invest in tax incentives, we would be boosting our renewable energy industry. In fact, this is empirically proven. A Duke University study found that on average, a year after a state began to offer tax breaks to incoming companies, the rate at which companies moved into the state increased by 25%. Boosting Colorado's renewable energy industry is incredibly important for 3 reasons. First is jobs. The alternative finds that renewable energy tends to be more labor-intensive than fossil fuel sources of energy, thus creating more jobs. This means more jobs for Coloradans, which would grow our economy significantly. Second is reducing dependence on oil companies. The alternative furthers finding that boosting our renewable energy industry would reduce our current dependence on oil companies. This would fortify the industry against oil shocks and lower the price of energy. Third is paving a sustainable future for Colorado. By boosting our renewable energy industry through tax incentives, we are taking the first step towards paving a sustainable energy future for Colorado. Thank you.
That is the pro side. Avi, thank you very much. Nick, you now have 2 minutes for any questions and cross-examination. Go ahead.
All right, sounds good. So starting on your, first point about this idea of an economic boom.
Sure.
You talk a lot about how the subsidies can pay for the cost of production, and especially they can pay for some of the costs the consumers would pay, right?
Yes.
So you're essentially saying that they would drive down the price of these specific subsidized businesses, correct?
Well, so what I'm saying is that by offering companies subsidies, you increase the supply at which these companies produce goods, and you increase the demand, overall creating more quantities of goods being sold,
yes.
more companies being bought, overall economic benefit.
Yes, but isn't that demand there because of the price reduction?
What do you mean?
Well, so whenever you give a company a subsidy, part of the reason, as you said in your own case, is it pays for some of the costs that consumers would pay. And the cost that the consumers pay is price, which means there's a price reduction. And my question is, how is the price reduction fair to the local Colorado businesses who have to compete with this?
Well, what I'm saying is that when we increase the amount of subsidies, we're giving those to local businesses in Colorado, small businesses, which I talk about in my case, and overall, we're leveling the playing field between big corporations and small corporations because we're not just subsidizing big corporations like you think that's what you think, but we're actually subsidizing small businesses as well, overall helping those businesses compete with the big dogs.
So how can a small business who's already in Colorado consider moving to Colorado?
Well, I'm saying that when we provide subsidies to corporations, A, that are moving into Colorado, and B, local corporations in Colorado, that's what causes the economic
Yes,
gain.
but do you think our government wants small businesses or big businesses to move into Colorado?
Our government wants both because they both play different roles in the economy. Big businesses are like the blue chip stocks that everyone knows about. Small businesses are what create the actual jobs in Colorado and what drive they're like the economic backbone of Colorado.
Are you saying that subsidies will then be doled out equally to big businesses and small businesses alike, and we should see an even distribution of this?
Well, I'm not sure what the government plans on doing. What I'm saying is that when we increase the amount of subsidies, we increase it to both small businesses in Colorado and big businesses.
All right, Nick, I'm going to have to cut off the questions right there. But now, Nick, it's time to hear your case in the negative. The question, should Colorado offer tax incentives to corporations that consider moving to Colorado? The floor is yours for 3 minutes.
All right. Offering tax incentives and subsidies is known as corporate welfare, government support of private businesses. However, this is unnecessary as the ITEP writes that 9 out of 10 decisions subsidized with tax incentives would have occurred even if the incentive did not exist. Corporations will come to Colorado anyway, and all corporate welfare will do is harm taxpayers. Brian Gabriel writes in 2018 that all government subsidies come with the hidden cost of taxation. Ultimately, taxpayers will have to pay higher taxes in order to fund government subsidy programs. Increasing taxes is detrimental to every tax-paying Colorado citizen. However, even with an increase in taxation, corporate welfare is still too expensive for our government to fund. According to the New York Times, Colorado reportedly spent $995 million on corporate welfare in 2016, or 13% of the entire state budget. The impact of this is that high levels of spending force budget cuts elsewhere. The ITEP writes in 2013 that offering more tax incentives requires spending less on public education, congestion-relieving infrastructure projects, workforce development, police and fire protection, or high-technology initiatives at public universities. There is no reason to subsidize corporations when it comes at the cost of education and public safety. The government does not have the money required to finance corporate welfare, and they will instead take the money from taxpayers and essential parts of our state budget. The money isn't even being allocated effectively, as a study done by Good Jobs First in 2017 found that the average cost per job produced by government subsidy was $456,000. $456,000 per job is an inefficient waste of taxpayer money, and the jobs aren't even created, just stolen. Mark Milk, a senior fellow at the Fraser Institute, states that corporate subsidies subsidies tend to redistribute jobs from one community to another, not create new ones. The redistribution of jobs is a problem for Colorado because jobs will be taken from local businesses. The Arkansas Center for Research and Economics states that subsidized businesses may also be able to attract more and better human capital at lower cost than other firms in the region, as well as obtain cheaper credits than existing businesses. Subsidizing corporations will only take jobs from local Colorado businesses, not create new ones like politicians claim. If Colorado taxpayers are paying almost $500,000 for each job taken from a local business, everyone in Colorado is getting harmed while large corporations make millions. Corporate welfare also harms local businesses by providing them with an unfair playing field. This is because corporate welfare is disproportionately given to large corporations. Brian Wallace writes in 2017 that 2/3 of the $68 billion in grants and allocated tax credits between 2000 and 2015 went to 600 large companies. Meanwhile, the yearly budget for Small Business Administration is only $1.4 billion. When a couple large corporations receive more money than every small business in America, it creates an extremely uneven playing field. This is why the TEP states in 2013 that in the case of retail, as much as 90% of the apparent direct benefits of tax incentives are offset by losses among the subsidized retailers' local competitors. All that corporate welfare does is steal customers and jobs from local businesses and waste millions of taxpayer dollars. Not only do small businesses get harmed, but the subsidized companies do as well. The Cato Institute writes in 2015 that companies that take government subsidies often become weaker, less efficient, and distracted from serving their customers. They take on riskier projects, they make decisions divorced from market realities, and they substitute lobbying for innovation. There's no reason to incentivize corporations to come to Colorado when corporate welfare harms everyone it affects.
Nick, thank you very much for your 3-minute statement. Avi, you now have 2 minutes for questions to Nick. Go ahead.
Okay, so at the beginning of your case, you talk about how we're going to be giving this money to large corporations, which harms small corporations, right? And then you say that companies that are given subsidies are harmed. So which one is it? Which party benefits?
No one. That is
Well, that's okay, but you say that when you help big businesses, you harm small businesses, and then you say that we actually are harming big business. So isn't that going to help small business?
Well, see, I think that you're combining two different arguments into the same argument. The reason big businesses are helped is because they are making more money, which allows them to drive down their prices and create an unfair playing field for small, local Colorado businesses. The way they are harmed is even while they are doing that, the subsidies distract them and cause them to be less efficient, weaker, and divert from market standards. The problem is that the money that the large businesses take goes straight to their heads and makes them much more relaxed and willing to take risks that ultimately don't help them at all.
Exactly. So you're contradicting yourself
Not
because
at
you're
all.
saying A, big businesses being helped harm small businesses, and then you're also saying that big businesses are actually harmed by subsidies. So, you are contradicting yourself here.
No, I'm just saying that subsidies harms everyone involved. Small businesses are in an uneven playing field, and while big businesses do have a price reduction, they still have less efficient management. They divert from their focus, and that is something completely different from price reduction. Price reduction is a benefit to big businesses and a harm to small businesses. Less efficiency is a harm exclusive to big businesses. They correlate, so they do not directly cover up.
Okay. So you also talk about how it costs $400,000 per job. Is that Colorado specific at all, or is that just American, nationwide?
That's just how much it costs on average.
Yeah. But is the study looking at America or Colorado?
It's just looking at everywhere. And if you take an average, so Colorado has had a lot of programs where they have offered a lot of money for companies. They've had a lot where they've offered a little. So has every other state. That's how it works. The right in the middle is the $456,000 per a single job. That is just being taken from a local business.
Okay. And lastly, same thing with the whole redistribution thing. That evidence you literally cited, it said American corporations that are big end up getting most of the money, right? Not just Colorado industries.
Well, it's just specifying between large corporations and small corporations in subsidies received. That's all it does.
All right, we'll have to end the questions right now. Pro side, you now have, Avi, 2 minutes for a rebuttal statement. Go right ahead.
Okay, so let's start on my opponent's first argument, which is that, when we offer tax incentives, it doesn't really matter because 9 of 10 business moves happen anyways. What he forgets to respond to is this idea from Duke University that a year after a state began to offer tax incentives, the flow of businesses into that area increased by 25%. It's clear to see that these movements would have happened only with the tax incentives. That's what I talk about in my case, where I tell you that when we increase tax incentives, we increase the flow of renewable energy jobs into America or into Colorado, which ultimately helps us because it creates jobs, it lowers our dependence on oil, and it creates a sustainable future for Colorado. That's the one thing why you can vote for the affirmative affirmative team or affirmative person in today's debate because of the fact that I'm creating a sustainable alternative to fossil fuels through my case, which overall outweighs everything he's talking about because we're looking at the long term here, and in the long term, focusing on renewable energy is the way to go. Next, my opponent says that we'd have to increase taxes in order to fund these subsidies. The thing about this is when we increase economic growth, A, through subsidies, and B, through tax incentives, we don't have to do that. And here's why. When we increase economic activity, we just increase the revenue of other sources of revenue. So things like, well, let's say that we increase economic growth and we increase the amount of income that people are receiving. That's going to increase the amount of revenue that the government gets through the income tax. The same goes for the sales tax. If we increase the amount of things that people are buying by increasing subsidies, we're going to increase the amount of sales tax. So we're not going to need to cut taxation. We're just going to be, it's going to be able to fund itself by increasing economic growth in the area. Next, my opponent says that we're going to have to face budget cuts. A, he doesn't tell you what's going to be cut. He doesn't give you any reason as to why things are going to get cut because of incentives. But B, we're not going to have to cut anything because remember what I just said. When we increase the amount of revenue flowing through other tax forms, we're going to be able to increase the amount, or we'll have to do budget cuts. Now, lastly, my opponent says that we're going to have to redistribute jobs and that big businesses actually get most of the incentives. When we look at Colorado, according to the Denver Post, small businesses and big businesses are equally likely to get a subsidy looking over the past 25 years. That clearly takes out his argument because his argument is talking about American companies. I'm talking about Colorado-specific companies. And so when we look at Colorado-specific companies, we can see that subsidies and tax incentives are the way to go.
Avi Bandari, thank you very much from Mountain Vista High School. Have to wrap you up there. Nick, you now have 3 minutes to respond and close. The question today, should Colorado offer tax incentives to corporations that consider moving to Colorado? You have the negative side. 3-minute close. Go ahead.
All right, sounding good. So starting on my opponent's first point about this idea of an economic boom and how we are going to be having an economic boom because it's paying for cost of production, it's decreasing prices, and it's targeted specifically at small businesses in Colorado. The biggest problem with this entire point is that subsidies aren't given to any businesses in Colorado. The resolution literally states that we should provide incentives to corporations who consider moving to Colorado. If you are moving to a state, it means that you are not in the state. That is just simple logic, and we shouldn't have to go any farther into this. This means that all of this evidence about Colorado-specific businesses, such as the Denver postcard where you just read that large corporations and small corporations in Colorado receive equal subsidies, doesn't matter because we're not talking about Colorado companies. We are talking about the American companies who are considering moving to Colorado. And remember my evidence that states that 500 companies receive more across 10 years than every single small business in America did. America has showed that disproportionately states are willing to give much more to large corporations, which means much more large corporations will be moving to Colorado than small corporations. Just look at the numbers. The money given is easily outweighing here. And the problem with large corporations moving to Colorado directs backly to my case, which he never really addresses. He never talks about this uneven playing field that is created when you give large corporations a lot of money, allowing them to drive down their prices and kind of hurting the small local businesses because they can't compete with a price reduction because they're not being sponsored by the government to reduce these prices. And remember, this myth of job creation is really just stealing jobs from local Colorado businesses. Remember my ITEP card that states that literally the only reason that large corporations moving to Colorado attract the jobs is because they can offer higher wages. This isn't because jobs are being created, it's just jobs are being stolen from local Colorado businesses who need the jobs way more than 1,000+ employee large corporations. Now going on to this idea of the renewable energy. I agree renewable energy is very important. However, the crux of this argument and the reason we can't really weigh this in today's round is my opponent provides no guarantee that subsidies are even going to be provided to renewable energy companies. Sure, he says that there's a lot of benefits to renewable energy companies moving into Colorado. However, throughout his entire case, he doesn't have a single piece of evidence saying that they want to, that the government wants to provide these renewable energy companies with subsidies, or that the renewable energy companies would choose Colorado above any other location. Because he has no guarantee that renewable energy companies are even coming to Colorado and only tells us the benefits of them coming, we can see that there's no guarantee that they even come at all. And finally, let's talk about this idea that businesses will only come if we are giving them incentives. He says that there's a 25% increase in business flow when you give them incentives. However, that still means that there is business flow into a state even when you don't give them incentives. If we can still have companies moving into the states without giving them an uneven playing field over local businesses and causing them to steal jobs and taxpayer money, then we should absolutely be doing that instead. If business flow occurs in my world, it means we can still have all the benefits he has of companies moving in without any of the harms that subsidies provide. And finally, let's talk about this idea of taxpayers. Because remember, he says that it's all going to be paid off of sales tax. However, at a $58,000 median income in Colorado, that means that each year one job provided for $456,000 will only provide $2,000 in sales tax. That's over 100 years to pay back a single job on income tax, not sales tax. My bad. And for that reason, I can only see a negative ballot in today's round.
Nick Gehrens from George Washington High School, thank you very much. Finally, Abby, your 1 minute close, a proponent on the side of Colorado offering tax incentives to corporations who choose to move here. Abby, go ahead.
So this debate can really come down to two main points. And the first is this idea that he brings up that these businesses aren't being given subsidies if they're small. The thing about this is that Colorado can incentivize small businesses to move into Colorado. Subsidizing small businesses is something that Colorado can do. And if the government recognizes all these harms that my opponent talks about, then they would give subsidies to these smaller businesses. So in the end, giving subsidies is the way to go in terms of small business growth and in terms of job creation. But now the main point in today's debate is this whole idea of tax incentives. Now, my opponent really brings up one thing. He says that business movement happens in my world too. The thing is, if we can increase business movement, that's going to be far more beneficial than just letting things sit, because that's how we become complacent with our economy, and that's how recessions happen. If we're able to increase business flow into the economy, that's going to greatly benefit our economy. And lastly, he says that there are no examples of businesses that are moving into Colorado that are renewable energy sources. Remember what I tell you from my case. Things like the Renewable Energy Grant are subsidies that Colorado already gives to allow these renewable energy sources to come into Colorado and provide jobs and to provide renewable energy. And so in order to provide the sustainable future for our state, I urge you to affirm the resolution.
Avi, thank you very much. Nick, thank you very much. Let's go to our panel of experts to get their thoughts on what they saw. Dominic?
Alan, as always, a very sharp debate. Gentlemen did a fantastic job. We're going to ask a couple questions, looking for some short answers from you. Eric, why don't you kick it off with a question for Abby?
Happy to, Dominic. Skilled, spirited, what a load of information in a very short period of time. Abby, let me pose this one to you and introduce a 5-letter word into this debate that I did not hear. That is called TABOR, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights in Colorado, that really limits the ability of government to grow. There are so many needs in this state, whether they're roads, schools underfunded, according to many people, etc. Where's the money going to come from to provide these tax incentives that you outline, and at what price? What is going to be sacrificed to provide these incentives?
So like I talked about in my rebuttal, there's a lot of ways we can finance this, and one of the big ways that I talked about was the fact that when we increase economic growth, like how I talk about business expansion, and we're going to see more quantity both bought and sold, we're going to be able to actually create. So what we're going to be able to do is increase funding through other taxes. And so that's things like the sales tax and the income tax, because when people make more money or when people buy more things, we're able to give more money to the government through those taxes. So that would be the manner with which we would be able to finance this, which would ultimately be a net gain for everyone. The government would have more money, the people would have more money, and businesses would have more money. Overall, it's a win-win-win.
Abby, a quick question. Do you feel that if Amazon HQ2 comes to Denver, small businesses in Denver will actually be benefited?
Well, that's the thing. When we increase business, there's an example of something in Wisconsin which happened where once Amazon was able to come in and set up a headquarters there, I'm not sure if it was Wisconsin, but it was a state in the United States, that technological boom helped surround the entire area with more small businesses, because now you need things to finance. You need companies that are able to support Amazon. You have companies that need to buy or like create goods for Amazon. You create a wealth of small nations around the big business. So overall, it's like a coexisting form, basically.
Okay. Nick, you're not off the hook. Eric, a question for Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. I'm going to pick up on Abby's argument. In the economic world, it's really called a supply side argument, that what you do is grow the pie, and then if you grow the pie, there's bigger slices available for everyone. Isn't that true in this situation, and that you can grow the economic pie by providing these incentives, and then there's more tax revenue available, and everyone wins at some level.
Sure, of course. Like, business moving into a state is going to provide some level of economic growth. My entire thesis of my argument is that the downsides to the economics, the fact that it costs $456,000 to create one job, which on average provides $2,500 of income tax per year, doesn't make it worth it. No matter how you look at it, the government is going to be spending way more money than it's taking in, meaning that we are going to have these budget cuts at some point. So while the economic growth does exist, it's greatly outweighed by the economic detriment to the Colorado government.
Nick, my question is about your argument about a big business comes into town and steals jobs from little companies. But if I'm a citizen of Denver and Tattert Bookstore wants to pay me $15 an hour, but Amazon's going to come to town with their new headquarters and pay me $20 an hour, isn't it better for me as a citizen to have that big business come to town?
Well, if you look at it as primarily like a wage increase, yes, it is. But you also have to look to the other factors as well. The first is that every single person who is working is also a taxpayer. And if you remember my evidence stating that every time we have subsidies like this, we have to increase tax money. So that means that while, yes, they're going to be making some more money per hour, they're also losing a lot of money yearly to pay for this job. Really, it just evens out for the taxpayer, and the taxpayer sees no real benefit or harm while the corporations get harmed.
Alan, can we borrow that coin from the coin flip?
Throw it right over to you. Terrific debate. We're going to give our panel a moment to consider whom they felt won that debate. I'll serve as the tiebreaker if you need. That'll give me a moment right here to let you know that this sets us up for a big championship, too. That's going to be broadcast on November 2nd at 7:30. Next week, we're going to feature our third place match. That's going to be excellent, too. Believe me, be sure and tune in for that. All right, panel, do you have a discussion or do you need my help to decide?
Well, we actually would welcome your help, but I think we were able to hash it out. Gentlemen, again, a fantastic debate, argued very well both sides. Somewhere, David Kopel was smiling broadly, Nick, when you said corporate welfare. But Avi, we decided to give the debate to you with the argumentation. It won the day. Congratulations, but really a well-debated topic from both folks. Great job.
All right, Avi Bandari and Nick Ahrens, great job to the both of you. You gave our viewers a wonderful debate. You both ought to be very proud tonight. And you will now, Avi, go on to compete in the championship round on November 2nd. And Nick, you did a great job. We'll see you next week in our third place match. That's going to be excellent, too. That's all the time we have for our program tonight. I want to thank our excellent students for accepting our challenge and participating in our debate. I also want to thank our esteemed panel for sharing their thoughts. And finally, thank you for tuning in. It is the support of viewers like you and our sponsors that helps to make this show a reality. As I mentioned, this sets up our big championship round Friday, November 2nd. Tune in next week for a third place match right here on CPT 12 next Friday at 7:30. And you can catch all of our great both sides debates on cpt12.org. Be sure and check them out. And you can catch me every morning on CBS 4 for all the latest news and information about this year's elections, as well as the big issues. For everybody at Colorado Public Television, I'm Alan Janae. Thanks for watching, and that is Both Sides of the Story.